So let's start with what I'm going to be showing you today. So basically, we have released a ton of new features recently, some of which, or most of which, we demoed at the SharePoint conference, and they're covered in these two blog posts. So Vase is going to have the links to these two blog posts available for you, but it's going to cover the features I'm going to cover, and then we'll do a couple of demos and answer any questions. And then I guess like Vesa did, so I've been here in the SharePoint team for about 3 years, and I'm responsible for our modern pages, the modern web parts that we create on them, and also our SharePoint News product. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of our features. So one of the first features that we've been asked for quite a bit is the ability on longer form content to jump to specific places in the content, otherwise known as on-page anchors. So we've recently rolled that out on any heading in your rich text editor, whether it's an H1, 2, or 3, you will get an anchor that floats next to that heading, similar to other services like GitHub or our docs.microsoft.com. That then adds the anchor to the end of your URL as a standard anchor, and it jumps that to the top of the page. So if you wanted to, you could open that in a new tab or direct link to that deep anchor, and the page will load and then jump down to that piece of the page so that you can see it. So it's a feature we've been asked for quite a bit. That's available in 100% targeted release now. Most of the other features I'm going to demo today are all at 100% worldwide. So let's look at another frequently requested feature, which is in the highlighted content web part. Let's see, I guess I can open up the chat window. Who wants their and, ors, and buts? No plus ones yet. I can't hear screaming on the phone, so you must.
I do.
Okay. So now in the highlighted content web part, and this is available 100% worldwide, you can go from basic filtering, where we give you all of the drop downs and options, to picking your source, and then depending upon your source, you can either enter KQL like I've done here, or if you have a camel query, you could enter camel, right? If your source was this site, you could then use either KQL or camel. And the query is pretty simple syntax. If I come back and I'll just click out of here, and I will bring it back to the not syntax I had. And the feature that I just showed you was undo. So I made some changes to this web part. I click out of the web part. I'm able to undo or redo my changes. In this case, all I did is mess up the query I had set up before. Let's see, I'll let other people answer the chat because otherwise I'm going to be distracted and try and answer your questions there. But so the two features we've shown so far are on-page anchors with deep linking, and then adding your own advanced query into the highlighted content web part, which could include nots, ands, ors, and they could obviously be grouped together. So let's drop that page and let's talk about some of our on-page anchoring improvements. So if I come to a page I've authored previously and I look at our text editor, I've got a couple of nice file web parts. We'll talk about these new web parts here in a second, as well as some of our enhancements to weather and the new world clock web part. But if I look over here, I've got this section that should obviously have some content in it. So one of those pieces of content looks like it should be a video. So if we come back to our stream video and I look at my content, let me just grab the URL for my stream video. And I am going to add that, but instead of going here to the toolbox and searching like I could for stream, which does work, or expanding the large toolbox and maybe going by category, looking at my text and media categories, which I could do, but sometimes when you're typing along and you're working, you just want to paste. And when you paste, we now add the embed video for stream or YouTube. In the future, we'll add more. But at the moment, those two work, as well as other URLs work, but don't provide a rich embed. They provide a preview of the page, similar to something like you'd get in Teams when you paste a URL. You don't get the full rich embed, but you do get a highlight with a title and a description of the web part. The other thing that I really prefer to do when I'm authoring content is if I grab some image content, which I'll move onto my screen instead of keeping it off, and I want this image here, again, I could come over here and say image today, and I'd get my file picker experience, which works well, but I think instead of that, it'd be easier if I could just drag and drop the content. So let's do that with a couple of images, and we'll add those to the page here. So we've got drag and drop of content. That works for files as well as images. As well, we have pasting of a URL into the rich text editor. Will either give you a preview of the URL if one's available, or if it's YouTube or Stream, we'll put in the full rich video for you. Trying to make that authoring experience that much easier and require less opening of the toolbox and picking web parts. In the future, you could imagine we open this up to other web parts. We call this experience our content handler experience. So we do plan on augmenting it in the future, but we started with the things that people use the most.
John, sorry,
yeah.
There's a lot of questions related on where are the images uploaded? So where are they heading? That's jumping on that one because it was asked quite a few times on the chat.
Sure, great. So our general rule for pages falls into two buckets for documents and images. When documents are added to a page through the file picker or through the content handler, the same path is followed. Those documents are added to the documents library on the site. When images are added to a page, so anywhere on a page, either manually through the file picker or again using the content handler, they're added to site assets. We create a subfolder in site assets with the page name, and then all assets on that page, all image assets on that page are stored in that folder.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. And again, how you add content doesn't change the destination of where that content goes, right? So as you add documents, they go to the documents folder. As you add images, they go to site assets. In the future, we have been asked a few times if documents could also go to site assets. If you have feedback on that, I'd love to hear it. This is how Modern Pages has worked since the beginning. The documents go to the documents library. But some people that have very large sites with many people have argued that they'd like to be able to put that in site assets and hide it from the document library. At the moment, we don't have plans to change that, but would love feedback if you have it. Okay, so we've covered drag and drop, and we covered adding URLs. We did multiple images and single image. And we've actually shown undo redo because I've used Control Z, but just for the purposes of pulling you in, I can also use the undo button, or I can use my Control Y, Control Z. If you're on a Mac, that converts to Command Y, Command Z. So if I want to add those things back. Okay, so let's talk about some other new web parts in particular. These were all about page capabilities. If we come up to some of our new web parts, right here, we've got our button web part. And sometimes it might seem a little simple, but a lot of people have asked us since we launched Modern Pages, hey, I used to use the content editor web part and stick a little bit of script on my page, and really all I wanted to do was make a button with some words and a link to it. So how do I do that? So as you know, from a security perspective, we have scripting requires you to either disable some features or create your own SPFX web parts, which I'm guessing most of you do. So instead of that, we took that use case and made it into a simple web part. The web part has a label, you can add a link, and then left, right, and center it. Similar to that web part with slight additional functionality is actually the call to action web part, which sometimes people also refer to as the banner web part. So here you can have a main title that you could edit, as well as a button with a link, and then you can change the alignment. As well, on the image that you've uploaded, you have the same features that we have in title region and in the hero web parts, trying to keep our image experiences more consistent. We could set a focal point on that image, or we could zoom in or zoom out of that image if we wanted to show a particular element. So that's our call to action web part. And then up here are the button web parts. Okay, now let's talk about our world clock web part. Pretty simple concept, but for people that run teams around the world, it's quite nice to be able to list those teams here. So as an example, our web parts team is actually in China, and they are quite a bit ahead of us, as you could see. So now would not be a good time to call and ask for some help. But it is 11:30. It is a nice idea to be able to list out your various partner locations so that you could see them in comparison to you. What we did when we created this web part is we went back and retrofitted our weather web part so that it would be consistent and be able to line up so that you could have the same weather as well as time next to each other. So we'll come down here, we'll add the same. And now I've got a nice listing of not only the weather in Vegas, but also in Suzhou and Hyderabad. Questions on any of those web parts? So we've got our button, updated weather, new world clock, or call to action web parts.
There's a question about personalizing the weather web part, weather near me.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so good question, Daniel. At the moment, that isn't in our plans. If that's something that you want to see, we could certainly talk about it and add it into our backlog. One of our first designs actually started with that, sort of the idea that I would own a page and it would always be relative to me. What we found when we tested it inside Microsoft is it didn't really match the user expectation. They expected to create a page and be able to define different locations, but it would look consistent for people. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. That was just some of our early feedback. So we put that into the backlog kind of deep and started with this more simple model. And then I see a couple of other questions related to it. Location label text. What's the question? Oh, can you edit location for weather or clock? Can you expand on the question? Like, can I rename this to be my Hyderabad? Like this?
Yes.
Yay, except my spelling's terrible, so let's not do that.
Does it support 24-hour time format?
Good question. I believe it follows your site format, your site time zone. So if your site is set to 24-hour, it would support 24-hour. And yes, Mike, Vegas office, I just did that. Hopefully you saw it. Although for Hyderabad, that's a little weird. And time, yep, it does support either Fahrenheit or Celsius.
I think you're good, John. I got the rest if something else comes up.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've covered the 3 new web parts and the update. We've talked about highlighted content now having and ors. So let's talk about a couple of additional page features, but I'm going to show it to you on a different tenant here. So I'm going to pull up an example page from a team site. And what you're going to notice here on the right-hand side is that's actually a vertical section added to this page. And I show it on a team site because our typical demos have it more on the home site of a team and have it in the main on a main communication site. So I often get asked, is it possible to do it on any page? And absolutely it is. So let's move some of these web parts around and see how you would add a vertical section. So I can edit this section just like I could any other section. So I can add section background color, maybe super bright reds. I have a designer on the phone. She's going to laugh at me later. I'm not supposed to do things like that after she spent so much time building a beautiful site. But we can move and rearrange web parts. So we'll pull out some of these web parts, and then
Did we lost the audio?
no, I'm just not talking. I guess
okay.
I keep
Okay.
up a,
That's the
I
yeah.
don't
So
keep up a
it's
standard monologue like YouTube is. So sorry.
sorry. It's the number one learning in all of this is the same learning as in radio. No dead air time, because otherwise people get confused. So
all right. Well, I'll just keep talking then. So why don't we just
exactly.
delete this section at the moment? And I'm going to whack those remaining web parts. Like any section, if you delete a section and it has web parts in it, those web parts get deleted as well. So how I would add my vertical section is I can come over and I get the option for vertical section. If I was on a communication site, I would have another option here, which is full width section. The two, full width and vertical section, cannot be on the same page. So if I add a vertical section here, and then I add web parts just like I would in any other vertical section. So I could also drag and drop content to those web parts, just like I did on the other page. So if I come over here and I drag some content, I can drag those images to it. I can also move web parts to that content. Oh, it looks like I didn't actually drop. Sorry, my bad. And then I will move some other web parts over to that section as well. All right, always fun to have some demo experiences that don't work delightfully. So I'm going to just skip to the next demo and we'll move on from there. So one other update from a web parts perspective that we often get asked for is in the news web part, we get asked to add new layouts, and particularly people that like the visual feel of the hero web part wanted this layout. So we added this to the news web part. We're using it in our own demo tenants for Contoso News. Here, there we go. Okay, so just like news had before, we had these 5 layouts. One of them quite frequent or quite popular is the carousel layout. The tiles layout, however, just brings in the hero capabilities and you can adjust it as you want. The reason that I'm clicking the apply feature down here, which maybe you're not used to in news, is if you have applied filters in the news web part, we don't immediately refresh the settings. So if you add the filters section, an apply button appears, and then as you make changes, that apply button needs to be clicked to make those changes appear. Typically, if I had removed all filters, then as I made changes up here, they would immediately show up on the main page. One other thing I'll point out while I'm here, it is a feature we launched earlier this year, but you'll notice that these visual highlights, these are websites that are defined as organization news. So in this case, we've got the leadership connection site. If I configure a web part to pull content from select sites, or if the user is configured to pull from recommended, and one of the sites I've selected is an Oregon News site, you'll see this visual styling on that, as well as in the SharePoint mobile app and on the SharePoint start page. Okay, so we've talked about vertical sections. We've talked through a bunch of our new web part capabilities. One feature I didn't actually show you earlier, which is kind of a nice feature because it simplifies page layout creation. So if I come down to my page and I'm going to discard the changes I just made. And then I'm going to do something that you might have wanted to do in the past. Instead of recreating content, maybe you want to show this content in two places, or potentially you want to bring additional weather and time zones to another place. You can now click the duplicate button. Duplicate works on sections. It also works on web parts. Okay, so just going through my pretty big list of fun stuff to look at. Let's do one other fun feature that we.
John, sorry to interrupt. If you have a chance to show a footer, there seems to be some excitement and energy around seeing the footer. I know that would be an audible from what you've got in your plan, but if one of these sites has a site footer, there seems to be some interest.
Okay, great. I will have to look at that unless you happen to know a site in our 005A tenant. I'll come back to that. I think I know where one is. Okay, let me open up. If we come back to this site, and I'm going to discard my changes here. And then we're going to go to, I'm going to go to just a page. I guess I'll use this site because I can see that it's already working. So one of the things that we showed at SPC is recommendations for viewers of the page. And the thing about recommendations is obviously you need content. So since these are demo environments, I only have 2 pieces of content that's showing up on this page. On some other pages, I'll be able to show you, this would normally be a carousel of 4 pieces of content, which would flip once and show you 4 more pieces. But what we're using is our machine learning and the graph based on users that you work with and other visitors of this site to show you what other people viewed. So let's say I work really closely with Andy and Vesa. If they had all clicked this article about the giving campaign and community empowerment, it would be a recommendation for me. And instead here of saying there were 32 people that read this next, it would say people that you work with. I think it might even actually say Andy and or Vesa read this next. And the idea is that we're trying to make the content you create, these durable, beautiful pages on SharePoint, get more engagement for readership, not only on your own detailed page, but also on other pages on your same site. So in this case, I've got a couple of actions here. One is I can say, hey, I don't have time to read this right now, so I'm going to save it for later. It goes into my save for later list, which obviously works on the SharePoint mobile app, in the SharePoint start page. And then we also have a web part that lets you show content that's saved for later that's recently gone to targeted release. I might be able to demo that here in a little bit if we don't have too many more questions. And then the other thing that we have here, because we want really good recommendations for you, is we have a way to say, I don't like this recommendation. It was a bad recommendation. And I can hide that recommendation and give us feedback that it wasn't good. And that helps train the algorithm that while we thought it was interesting for you, you didn't think it was interesting. Okay. Let's see. I think I am through my primary demos here. So let me open it back up for questions. And while we do that, I'm going to go look for a footer.
There's one on the Sales Hub or the Marketing Hub, I think Katie said also.
Okay, in which tenant, Katie? Keynote or?
She just said, cool, she just said a link.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 57 sites/marketing is the.
Hold on. Yep. Thanks, Katie. Ooh, that is a beautiful site. Okay, as we come down here, we can see all this great content that Katie's built out on this site for us. It's still loading a bunch of content. It's a very dense page. Got a nice section background here with some images, or I should say our icon library. We're using our icon library for these quick links. And we've got a collection of interesting sites that will be useful to the Contoso sales team, some nice events. These are documents. This looks probably like our My Documents website or our My Documents web part.
It's actually all for the hub. So those are all the popular documents in the hub.
Excellent. All right. And now we've gotten down towards the bottom of the page, and you can see we have this nice footer with a logo and the company name, and then these various links.
So, John, there's a couple of questions that maybe we can go over from the chat that I haven't gotten to. One is, when might we see dynamic data in the out-of-box web parts? Filter one list based on items selected from another.
So we actually have that to, let me think, two lists filtering each other. So we have dynamic data working in the embed web part, as well as with list as a data provider and embed as a consumer. Also, the file web part and the image web part are both consumers as well. List to list, I'm not sure where that's at in the backlog, but I don't believe it's out yet. And then other web parts that you'd like to have support dynamic data, if you could send us details on what you exactly are looking for, and I'm not talking about pages and pages of documentation, just I imagine my scenario is this web part is the data provider. Often people use lists for that. And then I imagine connecting these 3 web parts to it, and here's why. And that would be very helpful for us as we look at a next investment in dynamic data.
There's a lot of interest in the table of contents web part. Since this is a kind of a public call, I said stay tuned. I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, so we've worked on a table of contents web part internally, and we have it working inside Microsoft. There was some design discussion as we played with it, because as you know, we always prioritize quality over timeline, and we weren't happy with our first investment. So we've reimagined how it works, and the team's working on a new version of that inside Microsoft. And when we're happy with that quality, we will absolutely roll that out to you. So right now you can build a table of contents manually through using the Onpage Anchors and deep links, which I do occasionally for my status reports each month. But we will soon have a table of contents, but soon doesn't have a timeline related. It has quality.
And then there's a question around search related web parts. Any update on search related web parts like content search, search results, etc.?
Sure. So highlighted content uses search or Camel today. Are you thinking more in terms of like search refiners or display templates, or I guess what are you looking for?
Devang, who asked that I may be mispronouncing it, if he wants to hit on chat, I'll cover it.
Okay.
And then public service announcement, folks. Way early in the chat, there was some feedback around having page templates work across sites. So if you want to upvote, you'll see one of them's got 9, one of them's got 4. If you want that functionality, upvote my post. That would be helpful feedback for us.
Yeah, absolutely. For the question on dynamic data earlier, this was the demo I did earlier. I can edit this page and we can take a look. So basically what I've got here, if I edit, is I have a list. I've added a number of SPCNA videos to this list. And then within the embed web part, instead of embedding a single embed, I'm connecting to the source, which is that list I created, SPCNA videos. And then in this iframe for my video that shows YouTube content, I'm using a token right here. So in this case, I want the video column. So I'm using $video link, which is the name of the column I created in my list. And now as I go through the list, getting it a little bit better view for you if I get out of my edit mode here. As I move through the list, our dynamic data will pull up the videos based on the video link token. When will I be able to use a URL as a source for dynamic filtering? In what context?
For search query web part implementation, where you pinpoint to a URL and then in the URL as a query parameter, you have something like x equals y, and then that y can be set as a content query web part filter, and then the page will be fully dynamic. That's quite classic
It is.
implementation.
Yeah, it is. I have seen some third-party implementations of a solution for that. At the moment, I would say that's relatively deep in our backlog. If you think it should be different than that, I'd love to hear about it. One of the, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure that the implementation is contributed to PMP as well. It was the great effort from a number of MVPs at Takeda Pharmaceuticals that did a query-based
that is
Webpart.
definitely there. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so you could definitely
an open
look
source
at
solution.
it. Yeah, it's under the, it's not in the normal demo solutions. It's in something called solutions. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
SPDev solution, because it's more production ready, not just a random sample. So to say, we're trying to kind of differentiate those as well. But yeah, so open source.
Okay. What other questions do we have? We have about 8 minutes.
One thing, but I wanted to pinpoint that was question. There was a question quite a few times on the chat around that one. All of the templates which you're seeing here are coming from Katie. Katie Swanson is also on the call. We actually have a Katie scheduled to do a design discussion slightly later on the public community calls as well. But these are lookbook template version 2 templates, and we are currently working on getting these available in the provisioning service and as an open source tenant template. So that means that anybody in the world can actually provision these kind of demo sites available with example content and structures and all of that that's available in their tenants. Right now, it is provisioning.sharepointbnp.com. We're looking into changing potentially the URL, make it more Microsoft-y and all of that, and that work is now progressing. Already today, if you liked our Ignite 2018 designs and SPC in North America designs based on Katie's work, that they are all available for you to provision as long as you're a tenant administrator. And maybe one point on that one as well. For the V2 templates, we are designing them to be available even though you would not be a tenant administrator, which is possible with this engine. So more on details on that one on Ignite timeframe, most likely. Oliver has a good question on the modern task lists in SharePoint. Any news on the modern task list in SharePoint? You're not a list version though, John. So you're a Webpart person.
Well, that's okay. Our task solution, quite honestly, is we have a great team in Planner that focuses on tasks and has integration with Microsoft To Do, which also has integration with Outlook. That is our future-facing task solution. So the Planner team has built a full implementation of the Planner boards, as well as the analytics views for Planner boards, all as they run the exact same code. Their React code is also wrapped as a Webpart and is available on any team site. So if you were to come, I'm not sure that I have a Planner board set up here, but we'll look to see if I do. So this is a Planner board for this particular team. And this is what I was talking about, right? So you've got your Kanban style board with a bunch of rich content. If I come back to the website instead of jumping out, and I can actually add a Planner board as a page in my site. I could also put it as a web part on this page, but for the purposes of the demo, let's just show this alternate model. So I'm going to say new plan. And here, instead of a new plan, I'm going to use an existing plan instead. And I'm going to get a drop down, and we're going to show, and I've got an option here to create it in, show it in SiteNav. I'm going to create that page. And now I've added that project board and the tasks associated to it as a tab in my team site. So it's leveraging the Planner service, which, as I mentioned, integrates with To Do and with the Outlook calendar, as well as their mobile app. But now I've also added it to my team site.
And also maybe one thing related on this context, when you design this kind of a cool-looking team site and cool-looking page, you can absolutely surface all of these pages in Microsoft Teams in a snap of a finger, because we have that full SharePoint Teams integration. So if people prefer the Microsoft Teams look and view directly on these modern pages with the modern capabilities and fluent SharePoint experiences, you can easily do that as well.
Absolutely. That's a good demo I should have done, Vesa. Thank you.
Not a problem. Not a problem. We'll do it better in Ignite. No, just
okay. Other questions that people have?
We have 4 minutes.
I think actually Planner has pretty rich APIs, Mike. I'm
Yes,
not
they do.
super versed
They
in
do.
them, but when you're asking about having a way to bulk create regularly scheduled tasks, I know I've worked with a number of MVPs that have created a site design which calls and adds a number of elements as they create a site, and then they create a planner board with particular Kanban columns, etc. So I'd be curious what's not working there, and then ask you to definitely submit it to the planner team because they're constantly trying to improve their service.
Any news on modern calendar? Do you want to? Let's tackle that. And I'm going to move back on the slides already. But
okay, take over.
Do you want to talk about that one just briefly?
Yeah, the short answer is we do have a number of varied requests in user voice. I saw someone ask earlier, how does user voice influence our backlog? It absolutely influences our backlog. I showed a slide at SPC where I had gone through and shown all of the elements that we had looked at from user voice and how they had prioritized into the boom, it's done category. Or quite honestly, if it's an area we're not investing. So a number of people had asked about, we really want script editor because we want unmanaged script on random pages. And I had to say, no, we just don't intend to invest in that area. As it relates to calendar, there are a myriad of different requests. They're definitely something that we're thinking about. The bar, when we looked at it as we rolled out the events part about 2 years ago, when we did user testing, the bar needed to be from the users we brought in exactly like Outlook, not some random calendar, not some open source control, but Outlook. So we've spent some time working with Outlook on potentially leveraging Outlook components in SharePoint, but at the moment they're really focused on a couple of other things. So we know it's important and we'd love to understand the specific scenarios. So at the moment, I've broken them into sort of 3 large buckets, like just a calendar view on top of events. So just give me a wall calendar. Then there's the I would like a wall calendar on the group calendar part. And there's I would like full integration between Outlook, Exchange, and SharePoint, again, like you used to do in 2010. That third one is likely not getting done. The first 2, absolutely understand that you want that. If there are other elements of a calendar web part, I'd encourage you to add it to the thread in user voice, or you're welcome to send it to me directly in email if you have some good detail that you'd like to make sure we understand.
But thank you, John. Really, really great demos.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for the great questions, everyone. And you guys have a great day.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.